Hey, everybody, KC here. Michael, good to see you.
And everybody, it's Michael Sansolo. Nice to see all of you, and good to see you, Kevin.
So this is the beginning of what we're going to make a regular feature here on Morning News Beat. So any of you who have been around for any period of time know that Michael and I co-wrote a book a number of years ago called The Big Picture: Essential Business Lessons from the Movies. Michael's holding it up. And one of the, but the book didn't sort of end our ongoing conversation about business lessons from the movies. And so we talk to each other all the time. And we talk about business lessons that we see in movies and TV shows and all sorts of stuff. So we decided what we're going to do is we're going to do this Zoom conversation for Morning News Beat. It'll also be available as a podcast. You'll be able to download it and listen to the audio. And we're going to talk about various cultural touchstones that provide metaphors and lessons. Not just business lessons, sometimes life lessons, and not just movies. We're also going to talk about TV shows. We may talk about music. We may talk about the theater. We may talk about books. I suspect baseball will probably crop up from time to time. And so, but that's our goal. And so on a regular basis, we're just going to try and talk about business lessons from all these different kinds of things. And we do it specifically because all of these things that we're going to talk about have their own form of storytelling. And Michael and I both believe passionately in the power of storytelling for business, especially retailers, who I think we both feel the same way, which is when in a really good store, when you walk in the front door, they're telling you a story about their feelings about food, right? And or whatever it happens to be, quite frankly. It could be about clothing. It could be about, I don't know, plumbing parts or something. It's telling you a story. And that's what we're really going to focus on here. So in each of the episodes that we're going to do, we're going to focus on two movies or TV shows or whatever each. Something that's current, and then something that's a little bit more dated. Something that not necessarily a classic, but certainly an oldie and a goodie. So today, Michael is going to be focusing, his new one is going to be Ted Lasso. His old one is going to be The Devil Wears Prada. My new one is going to be Succession, and my old one is going to be The Hunt for Red October. And listen, when this is all over, we hope you're going to send us your suggestions about movies or whatever that you think offer really great lessons.
And Kevin, let me kind of add in that everyone watching this should be aware that we are not going to give away spoilers. If you don't already know that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what was that? Oh, no.
You got to go to the movies more. But we're not going to give away key plot devices. We're going to use the movies to help us tell the story, but we're not going to ruin anything for you. We promise.
Okay. You're up first. Talk about
All right, so let's start. Ted Lasso, which is a wonderful, wonderful show, ran on Apple TV, has actually just finished its run. And frankly, it's a show that you want people who are new managers to see, because Ted Lasso, the basic concept of the show is he is a college football coach in the United States who gets hired to be a soccer coach or a football coach in London, England, where soccer is a really big thing, but it's called football. And the two elements that came through to me in terms of management, first, he understands what he doesn't know, and he surrounds himself with a coaching staff that fills in all of his gaps. So he doesn't try to do it all. He recognizes he needs help. He also does a great job with, we always talk about IQ versus EQ, the emotional quotient. He's great at understanding his players, seeing what they need. But the thing that got me recently, and it was a nothing scene, doesn't advance the plot at all. The owner of the team is invited to a special meeting. There is this West African oligarch who has this brilliant idea that let's take the best teams from every league, whether it's Great Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and we'll have a super league. And we're going to make a ton of money with these teams playing each other.
Sort of what is it, LMV, the golf tournament, right? Where they split off from the PGA.
And he's laying this out with owners of these teams. Like, look, we will make so much money. And the owner of the team that Ted coaches, her name is Rebecca, and the team is AFC Richmond. She says, wait, stop a moment. And she starts talking about who really owns the team. And she talks about the fans, that if we do this, yeah, we'll make a lot of money, but the fans will lose what they have always loved, which is the rivalries inside of these leagues. And there are teams that are not super teams, and they love rooting for those teams. And what comes across is when we think about stakeholders, stakeholders are not just the people who own shares of stock or who have ownership of a company. Stakeholders are the communities that you serve. It's the people who work for you, the people who shop you. And we have to think of that totality, because those are the people who make us a success. And by the way, I was telling this to Kevin, ironically, right after this episode ran, there was a story on Yahoo Sports about the Southeastern Conference, which arguably is the most dominant football conference in college sports. And they right now they have 16 teams, and they're trying to figure out the schedule. And the thinking is, how are we going to do this? And some of the athletic directors involved in that conference are saying, we have to think about what the fans want. The fans want to see rivalries. The fans want to see, they want teams coming in, going out on a regular basis. So again, for businesses, we got to think about who are all our stakeholders. Don't forget the shoppers. Don't forget the people who drink or use your product, because they're your stakeholders also. And what appeals to them, that determines your success. The bottom line is important. I would never say otherwise, but you got to remember all the stakeholders. So speaking of money and stakeholders, Kevin, perfect setup for Succession.
Well, I want to say part of the line, I went and did a little checking. And one of the things that she says is, why would you ever consider taking something away from people that means so much to them? This isn't a game. Football isn't just a game. It's one of those amazing things in life that you make you feel awful one moment, and then it's Christmas morning the next. Just because we own these teams doesn't mean they belong to us. And I don't want to be part of something that could possibly destroy this beautiful game. So that's, I mean, you're right, absolutely right. It's such a great, and I think you and I over the years have often criticized baseball owners, and frankly, football owners or whatever, who are under the mistaken impression that it is their game. It's not their game. Mm-hmm. It's our game. And if they mess with it too much, they'll destroy it. So Succession, again, just wrapped up its final season. And one of the things that I wanted to just point out about Succession, and it's been a constant throughout the entire series, but it really came home during the last season, the season they just concluded, and especially in the first episode of the last season. Because what it's really about for the Roy kids, who have at that point in the show are trying to figure out how to do things on their own, is it's all about the deal. And it's never about the content, right? It's can we acquire this? Can we do this? Can we do that? But it's without any feeling for or appreciation of the meat of the matter, right? It's all about the bells and whistles. It's all about the money, but it's never about the thing itself and what kind of meaning it's going to have. And it's fascinating because one of the things they're talking about in the beginning of the season is they want to launch something that they call the 100. And the 100. And they describe it as a high visibility, execution dependent disruptor news brand with insights provided by the 100 top thinkers of all the major fields usually covered by the media: business, tech, food, politics, and the life. And as they're sort of explaining it, I know my reaction was, what exactly is it? Because it's very unclear. I mean, it's sort of, at one point somebody just sort of describes it as being, I want to make sure I get the line right. They describe it as being like, it's the New Yorker meets Axios meets Political meets this, which means it's not anything really original. They're only focusing on the deal. And at another point, they're talking about acquiring a Pierce Communications, another communications company. But again, it's not because they want its assets, but it's out of a sense of being carnivorous, not out of saying, oh, this is additive to what we're trying to do. And I think, and listen, God knows you and I both write about an industry that there's a lot of consolidation going on, with one big piece of consolidation, like, in the process at the moment. And the question is always, well, is it really additive? And to even go back to what you were talking about, is it additive for the customers? Is it additive for our stakeholders, or is it just about making it bigger? And I think that's something that um, that leaders, managers, owners have to think about. What is their motivation for doing it?
Kevin, that's a great point. You know, one movie quote you and I use a lot comes from Jurassic Park, the original Jurassic movie, because now I think there's 8 of them, which is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. And it's a hard question for businesses to ask, because as you're explaining from Succession, yeah, sometimes it's the golden ring and you want to grab it, but is it going to make the product better? Is it going to make the consumer experience better? And I'm not taking any position on any merger or acquisition, because Lord knows we have a lot of it going on right now. But that's among the questions that always have to be asked. The should. And I know that's a tough question, because sometimes, look, you and I are not running these companies. These folks have bottom line responsibilities. They have responsibilities to their shareholders. But again, that's why I love the point in Ted Lasso, because she's talking about the stakeholders. And the stakeholders for a supermarket could be the communities that we're in. You had a piece in Morning Newsbeat recently about all the companies that are pulling out of cities, and other companies that are saying, no, we have to be committed to those cities. We will ride through whatever the difficulties are, because those shoppers need us. We are essential. We provide an essential service. So it is a great point. And I don't think anyone would accuse either one of us of not being profit oriented, because by the way, if someone calls us up right now and offers us a job, we're going to jump on it, especially if it's a nice speaking engagement. We are capitalists to our core.
If they'd like to sponsor this podcast, we're there.
Call us right now. Yes, we'll interrupt the broadcast.
Operators are standing by. All right, give us the Devil Wears Prada.
Devil Wears Prada. And this movie, if you have not seen it, may be one of the best movies on management and mentoring I can ever imagine. I used to think The Godfather was the best business movie. I have changed my mind to The Devil Wears Prada. Basic story of this, I know you're scowling. Give me a second here. The basic story is we have this young college graduate played by Anne Hathaway. Her name is Andy in the movie. And she gets a job as a secretary to Miranda Priestley, played brilliantly by Meryl Streep, on a magazine that is clearly Vogue without being Vogue. It's all about fashion. Andy has no interest in fashion. She has no interest in that magazine. She wants to be a serious reporter, but the only job she can get is being a secretary to Miranda Priestley. And there's this magnificent scene about midway through the movie where Meryl Streep is looking at outfits to be in the next magazine. And at one point, someone holds up 2 belts. Now, to my eyes, they are exactly identical. And the person says, well, they're so different. And Anne Hathaway barely can contain a snicker because she can't see the difference in the belts. And Meryl Streep turns on her and explains to her in painful terms that she doesn't understand what this magazine does, all the decisions it makes for people, the jobs it produces, and just tears her a new one. It's an incredible scene. It's the cerulean scene, if anyone wants to look that up. The issue is, it does not change Andy's behavior in the least, because Meryl Streep, Miranda Priestley, has been nasty to her throughout. That's the kind of boss she is. So when she dresses her down, Andy learns nothing. A few scenes later, Andy is having a discussion with the art director, played by Stanley Tucci, and the same thing comes up. And Stanley Tucci dresses her down, that she doesn't understand the power of this magazine, the importance of the magazine, the jobs the magazine creates. The difference is Stanley Tucci has been nice to her throughout the entire movie. He has mentored her a little. So when he dresses her down, she begins to change. She goes to him for help. How do I dress more like the people in the magazine? And that scene with Stanley Tucci is where the movie completely turns, because she believed in him, because they had a relationship. She suddenly becomes very good at her job. She suddenly starts understanding what they are doing. And I think what it teaches all of us is we all hire people, and certainly people in retail. You're hiring a lot of people. Sadly, they're turning over quickly. If you don't tell them the story, why do we do what we do? Why is it that our brownies are so important? It's a brownie. Why is it so important? Why is our ham in the deli counter important? Our meats, whatever it may be. If they don't get the story, if you're not educating them, It's all just bouncing off them, and they're going to be there for whatever, 2, 3 months. They'll quit and go do another job. But if you make a small effort to connect, to teach, you may be able to turn somebody into a terrific employee. And The Devil Wears Prada. And by the way, Meryl Streep is spectacular in this movie. But it's a movie worth watching for the whole notion of management and mentoring.
The audience should know that Michael has a thing for fashion movies. This is a man who loves Sex in the City, and knows about Manolo. Is it Manolo Blahniks?
Manolo Blahniks. For all you know, I'm wearing them now.
Well, yeah. Let's not tip the camera down. Okay, let me do mine real quickly. The Hunt for Red October, great business movie, and I'll give you the basic plot going forward, which is it's all about how it takes place during the Cold War, and the Russians have created a submarine called the Red October, which can run so silent and so deep that they say you could park it in New York Harbor and nobody would know it's there. So it's a total threat to the balance of power. There's a Russian submarine captain, Marco Ramius, played by Sean Connery in his best Scottish-Russian accent, has decided but he just said, this isn't good. This is going to lead to World War. It's not going to prevent World War. So he decides to defect with a small proportion of his crew and defect to the United States to bring the Red October with him. That'll restore the balance of power. Jack Ryan, the Tom Clancy character, figures out what's going on. He's actually played in this movie by Alec Baldwin. The first time that Jack Ryan was played on the screen, he figures it out. And what happens is they figure out a way to put him on the Red October to help figure out how to get to help them defect. But the Russians have also figured out what's going on, so they send another submarine to hunt the Red October. Okay, at one point, the other submarine has found the Red October, and the submarine captain fires a torpedo at them. And Sean Connery, Marco Ramius, turns to the person at the helm and says, "Turn towards the torpedo." That's the best I can do. And the person at the helm just kind of looks at me and goes, what do you mean? He goes, "Turn towards the torpedo." And the person does it. And what the prep person doesn't realize is by turning towards the torpedo and cutting down on the distance between the two submarines, the torpedo doesn't have a chance to arm itself. Okay. And so it doesn't go off. It just bounces off the submarine and goes away. Other stuff happens. The point is this, the business lesson is this. In almost every case, if there's a problem, if there's a challenge, if there's an obstacle, if there's, your version of the torpedo, turn towards it. If you back away from it, you're going to allow the scenario to be played out on the torpedoes or the obstacles terms. If you turn towards it, if you embrace the challenge, if you embrace the problem, if you really own it, and then figure out what the solution is by going that way, what happens is you're doing it on your terms, not the problem's terms. And to me, that's a great management lesson. It's a great business lesson. Don't back away from problem. I know there's an old line about no problem ever got better with age. It just doesn't happen. So it's not like wine, right? Deal with things immediately. So that is our business lesson from the Hunt for Red October. So that gives you 4, right? It gives you Succession. It gives you The Devil Wears Prada. It gives you Ted Lasso, and it gives you The Hunt for Red October. That's it for this edition of what we're calling The Bigger Picture. And we hope that you'll send us your suggestions for movies or TV shows or whatever it happens to be, cultural events that have taught you a lesson. Okay, Michael, sound good?
Sounds good, Kevin. Let's hear from the audience. And of course, we're going to be talking to you guys.
We'll see you next time, everybody.